Don't hold yourself like that. 'Cause you hurt your
Considering the overpopulation issue, which gets brought up a lot.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I've always said that I don't actually feel any need to propagate my own genes, and that I would much rather adopt children that are already in the world. Aside from that, environmental concerns. I mean, if you're creating new human beings, when there are so many already, and socially and environmentally, it's just a much better thing to do to adopt existing children than it is to create more.
So
I don't have a problem with that. I don't feel a need for them to be my children, to love them. You know? I don't feel any desire. If I am what they say I am in evolutionary terms, then I really should want a constant communion with other women, and I should want I should want to have babies, and I should be going gooey at the knees over children, and I don't relate to those things. I don't feel those things as an instinct, you know.
Right.
So
I'm an aggressive person.
Yeah. In that sense, then having less children is actually more, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
Less is more.
But I mean, there's a philosopher of science. I think he's Canadian. His name is Ian Hacking. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he talks about human beings being interactive kinds as opposed to natural kinds, meaning what we say about each other, how we try to define each other into different groups and classify each other into male or female sexual identities or gender identities, that actually changes how individuals feel about themselves.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
Science can never be really objective, right? I mean, at least with human beings, when science is trying to tell us what a specific kind of human being is supposed to be like, they're actually not being objective, because they're causing that person to start to change the way they feel about themselves, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I'm constantly trying to get this into people's minds, that what we're observing in people around us, we're looking at the people around us, and our pattern-seeking minds are finding similarities between people, and saying, well, these people are all women and they all like to do this thing. And what people don't seem to understand is we're observing the product of socialization, and in order to know what we biologically are, we would have to observe people that have grown up entirely outside of any kind of cultural practice or any kind of social expectation.
Yeah,
and then you'd have a
bubble.
blank human being, and they would be the product of what they are biologically.
Right.
And I found, I don't know if you ever saw a documentary about an Austrian girl who was raised by dogs, a victim of child abuse who was raised by dogs, and she exhibited perfectly all of the behaviours of dogs. You know, and there was nothing feminine about it. There was nothing that you would associate as being female. You would associate everything as being kind of canine.
Right.
And so people really have a problem with this. They think that the society is a product of the biology, and I would argue that society is something that we've constructed in order. And I think the vast part of gender roles and propagating gender roles is in order to make money out of us. I mean, the cosmetics industry and the fashion industry and the pornography industry, these are all big businesses that benefit from the propagation of gender roles. And I don't think we really know what we naturally are at all. And I think it's crazy to overlook the role of social factors, and so much of the time people do that. And you know, feminists talk about kind of biological prison, that they're trapped in this idea that, you know, I'll say, I don't want to have children, and people will say, oh, well, you're still young. Wait until you're 30, the biological clock will kick in, and you'll become a baby-crazed monster, and just be any guy you can find. Will it? I don't know, maybe it will. I'll get back to you in 7 years when I'm 30 and let you know if some crazy biological clock's going on. I don't know if it will or won't, but...
Well, you'll never be able to tell if it's an actual biological thing, or you just psychologically thinking, or sort of being pressured by your society to think, well, maybe I should have a child now, right? How can we ever tell which it is?
Absolutely. You know, this idea of barren women is somehow they've failed to live up to their role in society. A man can live as a bachelor for his entire life and be highly respected because he's dedicated his life to his career, instead of, well, you can have children but you wouldn't even know about them because they're in the background. But women that try to dedicate themselves to their careers, or you know, have a role outside of the family, are seen as somehow unnatural. You know, that they've
Well, so we, you know,
Is it still that way? Is it still that bad, or have we come? No.
Oh, it's certainly improved vastly, but
yeah, but it's been going on for so many thousands of years that it takes more than like a few decades to totally.
Absolutely, yeah, the repercussion, and this is why it really annoys when people say that feminism isn't relevant anymore, because it's kind of like, well, you know, the laws are equal now, so we can stop talking about this issue. It's like, yeah, but there are still children being raised by parents and grandparents who were around in times when we weren't the laws, and changing the laws of the country doesn't change the way that people think about it as a society.
Yeah, no, it doesn't change the way we enculturate children, right, and help them construct their identities.
Absolutely, I've made quite a few videos on the topic of, including kind of my memories of being a young girl and being kind of taught this is what girls do and you don't do this, and then that's enforced by other children. I find it interesting that there are studies to show that children can be induced to view an entirely gender-neutral toy, say a yo-yo with a clown on it. And if you show a group of kids an advert of boys playing with that toy, then they'll say that's a boy's toy. And if you show them an advert, you know, with girls playing with this, that's a girl's toy. But there's nothing inherently, it's a gender-neutral toy.
Right.
I think so much of how we think about the differences between men and women has been taught to us and is not actually, I don't know. And it's upsetting to me on a personal level because I'm made to feel a lot of the time like I'm an abnormal person for not constraining myself to these roles.
Yeah.
Where did these, I mean, getting back, I'm not sure it relates psychological evolution to the, so that's the interior, right? But maybe the interior we space, which I call the culture. So there, I would think that there's an interior evolution to culture. If you can refer to people like Jean Gebser or Claire Graves for that kind of thing. So if you're subscribing to those philosophies, then talking about these societies that are constructing gender, right? What do you do with this understanding that there might be a developmental unfolding of cultural consciousness? What do you do with that?
Sorry, in what way do you mean, what do I do with it?
Do you spend more of your energy and resources understanding this developmental process and maybe put more psychologists, fund more of this going on, and then get some of, you know, more of your resources into that area to maybe start really investigating these and finding a practical way to maybe raise children with this knowledge? Is that something that's reasonable to you?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is the way in which we transmit to children our expectations of what they will become. Part of bringing about a cultural evolution is in legislation, but I'd say that the vast part of the legislative processes for equality are in place now. We have equal rights commissions to ensure that there's no institutionalized sexism and things. So I wouldn't argue so much for kind of, but I do believe that if it's a law, if the laws reflect equality, then it becomes more instigated in people's minds. I'm not sure if I fully understood what you were asking me.
I suppose it was the relevance of paying attention to, and maybe the mapping of an interior evolution of the collective we space or culture or societies, and then what we do with maps, right? We use them to navigate territory, just in a practical, pragmatic way. It's never actually the actual territory, but they seem to get us to where we want to go faster. That's what I'm saying here.
Well, I think a question that maybe we could ask that's more specific is whether or not cultures even do necessarily evolve. Like, was this feminine or feminist reaction to the patriarchal society inevitable? Or did it have to be struggled for, and all along the way it was a contingent matter as to whether or not it would succeed, and it hasn't fully succeeded yet, right? So is it inevitable?
Not in my opinion.
You don't think it's inevitable?
Cultural evolution. I see cultural evolution as being brought about by a small percentage of people that are pushing against the norms. I think a lot of people have a tendency to want to preserve and see as right the culture. And the only way that any cultural change has been brought about by a struggle by a small percentage of people, the minority against the majority. And it's through this kind of interplay of pressures within society that we move forward, and perhaps not in the direction of one of the minorities, sorry, but as a whole, these pressures play out on each other, and we end up moving in a kind of midline direction, moderate direction down the middle, sort of thing.
Right, but it's a direction, is it?
You hurt your knee.